It's a Saturday night in Queens, New York, and Shipwreck Bar is rocking to the thunderous sounds of a drum ensemble led by Trinidadian-American Jason Nundu. This is Tassa, one of the heartbeats of a North Indian folk music culture that stretches from roots in village India through the Caribbean and Pacific to the nightclubs of New York City. The Caribbean basin countries of Trinidad, Guyana, and Suriname are multiracial societies that include around 1 million people of East Indian descent. This Indo-Caribbean population cultivates some of the most distinctive and dynamic music in the Americas, from traditional folk songs to pop chutney. After slavery ended in the British West Indies in the 1830s, the British colonial government started importing indentured workers from abroad as a source of cheap labor. Many thousands of people immigrated to the region, including the Dutch colony of Suriname, from China, Portugal, and even Africa, creating a rich cultural mix. By far the largest number of immigrants, around 500,000, came from India between 1845 and 1917. Their descendants now constitute around 40% of the population of the three countries. During the latter part of this same period, around 60,000 indentured Indians also immigrated to the Fiji Islands, another British colony in the faraway Pacific. Most of the Indian immigrants to the Caribbean and Fiji, and those whose musical legacy is the subject of this film, came from the Bhojpuri region of North India, today a poor, backward, and densely populated area straddling the Indian states of Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. The immigrants came as sugar plantation workers, and many of them remain agriculturalists today.
My father belonged to Uttar Pradesh.
Yeah.
10-15 for the linemen in India. He said, man, what are you doing here? Come go in Trinidad. He said, Trinidad is a place they have sugar. They call chini mean chini sugar. He said, chalo Trinidad. Sahaje mein paisa mili. और यहाँ पर 2 लोग क्या करा था? He said, all right, they will go in Trinidad. They load them up. But when they come here now, when they see looking to ship sugar, you know how shipping sugar. They have to go and plant cane, have to cut cane, carry factory and making sugar. And when they see that, now they hold a cane root and they cried. Say, leave them mother and father, knowing that they only have ship sugar in this country. But my father was a hard-working man, he didn't sorry.
Although most Indian immigrants were poor and illiterate, many of their descendants, like Gayadeen, drawing on traditions of thrift, hard work, and family and community cohesion, have prospered. Many have moved into towns and cities where they have excelled in business and their professions. Since the 1980s, many East Indians from Guyana and Trinidad have migrated to North America, establishing flourishing communities in New York, Miami, Toronto, and elsewhere. Meanwhile, many Indo-Surinamese have migrated to the Netherlands, and Indo-Fijians have settled in Australia and the west coast of North America. In the process, they've made Bhojpuri culture, in both traditional and creolized forms, into a global phenomenon. After the indentureship program ended in 1917 and the ships stopped coming from India, the Caribbean and Fijian communities became isolated from the ancestral Bhojpuri region and had no contact with each other. In each locale, they had to share their new homelands with earlier inhabitants, whether Creole West Indians or indigenous Fijians. Nevertheless, on the whole, the Indians were not only able, but determined to maintain much of their traditional culture, whether the rustic folkways of the ancestral Bhojpuri villages or the broader traditions of North Indian culture. Although most Indo-Trinidadians and Guyanese no longer speak Bhojpuri Hindi, Indians in the Caribbean and Fiji have tenaciously held on to their religions of Hinduism and Islam, both in pan-regional South Asian forms and in traditions that were distinct to the Bhojpuri region. Indo-Caribbeans have also retained their fondness for Indian cuisine. Dishes like roti and curry goat have become mainstream West Indian delicacies eaten by people of all ethnicities. It's perhaps in the realm of music that Bhojpuri culture displays the greatest resilience and dynamism. Most Indo-Caribbeans, and especially the younger generations, have a cosmopolitan fondness for Bollywood film music and for the local Creole hit parade of reggae and soca. But many Indo-Caribbeans, both young and old, also enjoy music and dances that derive ultimately from the 19th century traditions of towns and villages in Bhojpuri, India. Probably the most familiar aspect of the Bhojpuri musical legacy is chutney. Chutney derives from the lively and sometimes saucy folk songs and dances performed by women, with no men around, at Hindu weddings in the Bhojpuri region. After taking root in the Caribbean, starting in the 1960s, chutney literally came out of the closet, and in the next decades became a fixture not only of weddings, but of the public entertainment scene as well. Conservative Hindu moralists were not happy about the whole phenomenon, and especially the way women dance, but chutney was simply too much fun for it to be stopped. Chutney, although widely popular nowadays, is only one part of a stratum of Indo-Caribbean culture that derived from 19th century Bhojpuri villages and that persists like a strong undercurrent to the present. One of the oldest and traditionally most widespread forms of song in India consisted of narrative epic ballads sung to simple repeated melodies by bardic specialists. In the era before cinema and television, such tales enraptured audiences, conjuring up images of mighty kings and fearsome demons. Like European ballads of the Iliad, the Odyssey, and the Song of Roland, the most popular Indian epics, including the ancient Ramayana and Mahabharata, were tales of great wars with heroism and treachery, earth-shaking battles, and meddling divinities. In the 19th century in the Bhojpuri region and nearby areas, one especially popular epic was the tale of the heroic warriors Alha and Udal. Although mostly passed down as an oral tradition, around 1870 a Hindi version of the epic was published, and copies of it made their way to the Caribbean. Lal Ram Jagannath is one Trinidadian vocalist who still has a tattered copy of the book and enjoys singing its rhymed narrative to some of his elderly Hindi-speaking friends. As in India, Alha is properly sung only during the rainy season months of July and August.
देश हमारे नगर महोबा जहाँ पर बसत रजा परिमाल छोटे भैया हम आल्हा के और उदन है नाम हमारा. So I say he is a small brother of Alha and his name is Udan. Five brothers. There's five brothers. Yeah. Alha, Udan, Deva, Malke and Sulkhan. Five brothers.
A very different kind of music from the Bhojpuri region is that played on the nagara drum pair, often with a large frame drum called dafla. The nagara and dafla are ancient instruments in India, still common throughout the north. In the Bhojpuri region they are folk drums with their own repertoire of rhythms or hands. Although usually played by lower caste specialists, the nagara is mostly associated with the cattle herding caste of Ahirs or Yadavs, whose men and boys dance vigorously to its driving rhythms. Since the ranks of indentured immigrants to the Caribbean included many Ahirs, The nagara, dafla, and ahir dance took root in that region and are still occasionally encountered, as in this stage performance by Surinamese artists. In the Caribbean, most often the nagara has been used to accompany a kind of Bhojpuri folk song called birha. Like Alha, birha consists of verses set to a simple, repeated tune, but its lyrics are in the Bhojpuri dialect and can be about anything. Birha has declined in recent decades, especially in Trinidad and Guyana, where English has replaced Bhojpuri Hindi, but in those countries and Suriname, there remain handfuls of elders who sing it. Suriname's Mangre Sivanarayan has composed dozens of birhas, several of which comment on the changes he has witnessed over the course of his long life.
हरे पिता के नाम सुनो धर्म सिंह बाबू और माता के धर्म देई है नाम सुन ले भैया माता के धर्म देई है नाम और पुत्र के नाम सुनो हेनी जोनी वेम्पी और पुत्री के मारी चलुईसा नाम धरावत बाटे पुत्री के मारी चलुईसा नाम और बड़ा उमंग है और तरंग से बाबू देखो रादियों में यो दे ले बधाई जाए के भैया रादियों में यो दे ले बधाई और सुनने वाले मित्र जन सुनते हंसत हैं ठठाई और ठठाई बजत बाटे हेनी जोनी विम्पी के बधाई.
Sivanarayan is one of a small number of Indo-Caribbeans who knows exactly where some of his ancestors came from, including his India-born father.
गोड़ा जिला हरैया तहसील कौवापुर डाक खाना लबेदपुर गांव.
The birha that is sung in the Caribbean, brought by people like Sivanarayan's father during the indentureship period, represents an archaic form of the genre that is seldom heard nowadays in Bhojpuri, India, where modern birha is an entirely different kind of music. One elderly singer in Banaras identified the Caribbean style as an old form called chutney.
ये तो ओरिजिनल बिरहा है. बिरहा में एक खड़ी बिरहा होता है और इसके बाद होता है जोरनी और दिस इज जोरनी. देखिए कि सावा कर गए कुलेल वह कल्प वृक्ष की डारी पर राम राम घुरऊ किसान कह रहा बैठ के द्वारी पर हरहा कति कह राम कह बरहा जब चढ़े गड़ारी पर राम राम पर घूमे बैल जब आवे मोट लिलारी पर छक गए हीरा रमन भैया किसान की बलि हारी पर.
Birha, you hear at weddings. Weddings, you'll hear also some yajna, like the last day or so forth. Different functions, you know, there are quite a few functions. And when they have plays and so forth, like Ramlila and Natak, they have this kind of play. You'll hear birha also.
Most typically, birha would be paired with lively ahir dance, accompanied by nagara or dafla. Another context in which birha could be sung is an old folk theater tradition called Sarvan Kumar, which weaves comedy, dance, action, and birha into an episode from the Ramayan epic. The Sarvan Kumar tradition is dying out under the influence of the mass media, but the mass media can also help document it for posterity, as in this YouTube posting of a Sarvan Kumar show with birha from a Trinidadian wedding. A few activists have made conscious attempts to preserve birha and even modernize it. In Trinidad, Ajit Prem Singh is a merchant, music producer, and through his organization Mera Desh, a promoter of old and new forms of Indo-Trinidadian music and culture, including birha and other folk styles. Prem Singh's store in Chaguanas has served as an unofficial headquarters for Indo-Trinidadian music over the decades. Prem has tried to revive birha through competitions and CD releases in old and new styles.
In 1995, we did a birha competition, and we had over 15 birha singers.
Wow.
But it's sad to say, that out of the 15, I think about 12 have gone to the great beyond. They have died. There are about 3 alive presently, I'm also putting a little piece here and there, I think, by producing little CDs in the market to set the awareness, so people can come back there. Because what happened is, I made Rakesh and Rasika sing birha in their recordings, and it made big hits. They was in the top 10 for a few weeks. Well, they did the birha songs.
टूर ने बुला भेजावे ससुरारी ओही ने बुला के बनावे तरकारी.
Meanwhile, Bhojpuri-speaking Indo-Surinamese audiences can still enjoy the whimsical birha lyrics improvised by Pinto Shivanand, set to digitized soca beats. In English-speaking Trinidad and Guyana, the decline of Bhojpuri Hindi has certainly weakened the Bhojpuri folk song traditions, but various kinds of music on the island have survived the erosion of their linguistic bases. Followers of the West African-derived Orisha or Shango worship sing songs in the Yoruba language, which is no longer spoken in Trinidad. Similarly, the Venezuelan-derived Christmas music called parang remains popular even though few people understand its Spanish lyrics. Folk songs in Bhojpuri Hindi are still sung and heard in a variety of contexts, despite the decline of that language. At many Hindu Trinidadian weddings, a troupe of women, using locally published songbooks, may be hired to sing the traditional folk songs that accompany nearly every stage of the Sunday rituals. In Trinidad, Bhojpuri folk songs are also kept alive in staged forms with whimsical skits by the Sanatan Dharam Mahasabha, which holds children's folk songs competitions and runs over 40 primary schools. Prem Singh's Mera Desh organization also holds traditional song competitions, along with contests in diverse aspects of local Indian culture.
But we have been existing for the past 19 years in Mera Desh. In 1991, we have started off and we have done many competitions. We have done a doubles competition, a roti making competition. We have done sweets, delicacies, like laddu and pera, and also we did appetizers like kachori and sahina competition. We did a micorama with the mic men with the funnels on their cars. We have also done a senior Tassarama, a junior Tassarama.
In Suriname, a key figure in the revitalization of Bhojpuri folk song is vocalist Chris Ram Kalawan. His store in Paramaribo, like that of Ajit Prem Singh in Trinidad, is a central meeting place for local Indian performers. Ram Kalawan himself is a dynamic and versatile artist. Aside from making innovative dance band music, he hosts a TV show featuring traditional performers and sings and composes new songs in traditional forms like Kitchrie, a Bhojpuri rainy season folk song style.
ये फर्स्ट कजरी हमने लिखे हैं कैरिबियन का कि दुनिया जाने कि कैरिबियन में भी कजरी है और ये कहीं पे हमारे दिमाग में बुजुर्ग के लिखे हुए कुत्तर था मैंने ढूंढा अपने माइंड में मिला और बैठ के लिख दिए 4 महीना के 4 महीने गर्मी परत है बिना संयक कजरिया हम जाए कैसे लज्जत है लज्जत जो होना चाहिए है वो वहाँ पर परंपरा है अपना स्टाइल है अपना प्रांत के अपना स्टाइल है अपना परंपरा है पर हम लोग सबके मिक्सचर है हम लोग परिवर्तन ला रहे हैं हम लोग थ्रू द वेस्टर्न वर्ल्ड और हम लोग भारत के बिहार के भोजपुरी गीत को जिंदा रखे हुए भी उसमें परिवर्तन लाते हैं उसमें सोका चटनी धरते हैं उसमें रेगे धरते हैं उसमें रैप भी धरते हैं बबलिंग धरते हैं मतलब कि जो होना चाहिए था कब के हो रहा है और वो सूरीनाम सिर्फ करता है और ट्रिनिडाद गयाना कम मात्रा में पर सूरीनाम और ट्रिनिडाद इज नंबर 1 इन द वर्ल्ड टू डू दिस ऑल एंड वी आर क्रिएटिंग दैट बिकॉज वी टेक दिस एज हमारे लिए एक पूंजी है इसको हम लोग को डेवलप करना है नहीं पकड़ के बैठना कि यही इसको मिक्स मत करो
While Chris Ram Kalawan adapts rainy season Kitchrie songs to the Caribbean climate, another seasonal Bhojpuri folk song is chowtal, which is sung during the springtime Hindu festival of Holi or Phagwa, usually in late February and early March. Although having a mythological religious origin, Phagwa is a time of fun and merriment in which Hindus, following the example of the mischievous Lord Krishna, playfully spray each other with colored powder. Phagwa is celebrated in various ways in different parts of India. In Krishna's mythological homeland around Mathura, his antics are dramatized in Ras Leela theater. In the nearby rival towns of Nandgaon and Barsana, men from one town cower under leather shields and submit themselves to beatings by Brahmin women from the other town. Everywhere in North India, people sing folk songs and hurl colors at each other. Indo-Caribbeans avidly perpetuate this merry tradition, even if often substituting carcinogenic talcum powder for traditional powders. During the indentureship period, the characteristic Phagwa folk song style of the Bhojpuri region was chowtal, which is avidly sung today by Caribbean and Fijian enthusiasts who gather to sing in temples, house blessing visits, and friendly competitions. In chowtal, a set of 4 or 5 singers playing jhal cymbals sing a line of Hindi verse, which is then repeated by the other singers, while the first group catches its breath. Accompanied by dholak barrel drum, the song goes through a series of complicated rhythmic modulations, accelerations, and decelerations, including exuberant climaxes where the words are shouted at tongue-twisting speed. Chowtal is sung in distinct variants in different parts of Guyana, Trinidad, and Suriname. Meanwhile, it is also avidly sung in very similar styles by Indo-Fijians in the Pacific and the west coast of North America, where it might even provoke dancing in Bhojpuri style. Meanwhile, back in the Bhojpuri region, chowtal is still sung in a similar fashion as by this group in a market town near Mirzapur. Surprisingly, chowtal is sung only in scattered locales in India and is clearly in a state of decline.
हमारे यहाँ बहुत सी पुरानी चीज़ों का ख़त्म होता जा रहा है, जैसे बूढ़ी औरतें हैं, शादी विवाह में या जब बच्चा पैदा होते हैं तो सोहर गाती थी, या कुछ शगुन मनाती थी माड़ों के टाइम, चुमने के टाइम, ये सब गीत धीरे धीरे अब खत्म हो रहा है। ये फिल्मी गाने सब इसमें अब लड़कियां गाती हैं। इसे चौताल तो अभी भी देहातों में कहीं कहीं होता है। हाँ, तो वो परंपरा धीरे धीरे खत्म है।
Chowtal's continued vitality in the diaspora owes much to the efforts of knowledgeable experts determined to keep the tradition alive. In New York City, one such expert is Guyanese-born Rudy Sesnarayan, a virtuoso dholak player who has cultivated a vast knowledge of chowtal and other traditional song forms. Sesnarayan has published a book of old and new chowtal lyrics, and he has started his own chowtal group, to whom he teaches not only the specific substyle called chowtal, but also a range of more esoteric substyles known by elder specialists. Much of the Bhojpuri folk music heritage in the Caribbean and Fiji, like birha and chowtal, consists of entities that have changed or declined in North India itself. One enigmatic instrument is the dantal, a steel rod struck with a U-shaped clapper called the tali. In both Fiji and the Caribbean, the dantal is used to accompany various sorts of singing.
So this is the tali, this is the dantal. Put together and you play.
The dantal represents something of a historical mystery, as it is very rare in India today and hardly anyone in the Bhojpuri region has even heard of it. One book published there in 1980 displays it, identifying it by name, and a few elder musicians recall its use in former times.
दंडताल हाँ,
लेकिन आजकल लोग इस्तेमाल नहीं करते।
नहीं, किसी को सोहर नहीं है। They are not knowing the how it is tackled.
और दंडताल कौन से गीत के साथ बजाया जाता है? बिरहा के साथ।
हाँ, yes.
और यानी किसी दूसरे
जैसे करताल लोहे का लेके बजाते थे, वैसे उसको जो है ऐसे छड़ी की तरह से होता था, और उसे घोड़े की नाल की तरह से एक दूसरा होता था, उसे एक हाथ में लेके उसी से बजाते थे, ऐसे खड़ा करके। और बहुत सुंदर ध्वनि बिरहा के राग में मिलाते हुए, उसकी आवाज़ थोड़ी तेज होती थी। हाँ, और वो एक लोहा होता था टेकुआ, जिससे कि रेलवे की पटरी बनती है, उस लोहे का वो बनता था। उस धुन को
किसी गाने पर बज सकता है, किसी भी गाने पर उसका।
और लेकिन फिर लोग छोड़ दिया।
पुरानी चीज हो गई ना, बीती बात हो गई, इसी वजह से छूट गया। अब नए चीज आ गए। दंडताल इस्तेमाल
वो किसी खास इलाके के मुतालिक था या कहीं भी, यानी भोजपुरी चीज है जैसे?
ये भोजपुरी से ही है। हाँ।
Like old-style birha, the dantal might represent something that existed a century ago in the Bhojpuri region, spread to the diaspora, and then declined in India. But some Caribbeans believe that it was invented in their own region by the immigrants, the so-called jihadis, or ship people.
The dantal enigma, as you know, is something that keeps me busy. And during my last trip to India, 2 years back, I think 2007, I was convinced that it is from that it origins is somewhere in the Bhojpuri speaking area, especially in the circle where you still find the Alha tradition alive, where along with the chimta they use some sort of dantal, which has got a different name called Gaj, Sikh or Sariya, which all refer to an instrument made by a piece of metal, okay? A metal rod, whatever. But lately, I have started having doubts about this theory. There is also possible that the Jahajis took it back. It originated here, but the Jahaji, when they, after finishing their contracts, serving the term after 5 years, some went back and reintroduced it in India. And from there, perhaps, they brought it to the other diaspora destinations. It's, I think, one of the open questions that will boggle our mind for generations.
Some of the most vital Indo-Caribbean cultural activity takes place in the secondary diaspora site of New York City. Preeta Singh, a Guyanese-raised cultural activist and dramatist, heads the Raj Kumari Center, which promotes old and new forms of Indo-Caribbean arts and culture, especially through annual stage extravaganzas called Kitchrie.
Well, the Raj Kumari Cultural Center was founded by the late Gaur Singh, who was a Kathak exponent born in Guyana. And on his return from India, having studied with Birju Maharaj at the Kendra Kathak, he became a national icon, working closely with his mother Rajkumari Singh, and they embarked on a journey of gathering the folk artists and traditional Bhojpuri artists and Madrasi artists from the rural areas and introducing them into the national cultural scene of Guyana. And so in New York in 1995, Gora formed the Rajkumari Cultural Center. It was the first community arts organization in New York. Actually, is the first Indo-Caribbean cultural center in the world at the time. And then the Kitchrie Festival came along, which is more than just a festival. It's a program that we have, and it has become the field where we bring elders, young masters, professional artists, and students together, so that there's this wonderful interaction that goes on, a sort of teaching and learning, common teaching and learning. From the perspective of the Rajkumari Cultural Center, over the last, 10 years, 12 years, we've been pioneering this in our community and pioneering working with the younger generation so that they can develop a palate and an appreciation for our indigenous culture in the raw, without the dressings. I think we've been responsible for the revitalization of quite a lot of things in the community. We've brought a lot of new pride.
One kind of neo-traditional music is so popular that it hasn't needed any help from arts organizations. Tassa drumming is one of the most dynamic parts of the North Indian musical heritage and has become a lively component of Trinidadian music culture. The Tassa or Tasha drums may have originated in Persia, but the ensemble assumed its definitive form in North Indian cities like Lucknow and Banaras in the early 1800s. Today, groups with Tassa kettle drums, bass drums called dhol, and metal cymbals or shakers are heard throughout North India. In Bhojpuri region cities like Banaras, Tassa groups play at various sorts of outdoor events and processions. Aside from weddings, a Tassa band could be hired to enliven a political rally. Tassa drummers might also be engaged to accompany a street protest, like this march denouncing the careless use of kites with glass-sharpened strings that cause many injuries every year. In both Trinidad and North India, Tassa groups are especially prominent in Muharram, an annual event in which Shia Muslims commemorate the martyrdom of Hosay, a grandson of the Prophet Muhammad. Hosay and his comrades were killed in a battle in Karbala, modern-day Iraq, in the year 680. Some ardent Shias honor their fallen saint by beating themselves with whips. Other Muharram participants express their devotion by building mobile taziyas, imaginative replicas of the tombs of the martyrs, which are paraded through the streets. On one level, Indian Muharram dramatizes the community's devotion to its martyrs. On another level, it's an occasion for working-class neighborhoods to display their solidarity and take pride in the craftsmanship and beauty of their taziyas. Meanwhile, a more immediate level of drama involves getting the taziyas underneath the tangle of canopies and electric wires that dangle over every narrow lane. If the top of a tazia gets knocked off, someone has to pop into a doorway, scamper up some stairs, and put it back on, perhaps enlisting the help of a child. Accompanying the taziyas are several Tassa bands, mostly composed of amateurs like these players in Delhi's Old City. Some play showy drum rolls and solicit tips. Generally, however, the Muharram rhythms are more solemn in character, like those played by these drummers in Banaras. In the 1800s, Muharram took root in Trinidad and British Guyana, where, rather than being purely Shia events, the processions came to be joined by thousands of other Indians as well as Afro-Caribbeans. Repressed in the 1880s by fearful British rulers, the processions were thenceforth permitted only in the Trinidadian town of Sidros and in the St. James neighborhood of Port of Spain. There, Hosay, as it is called locally, is commemorated every year by family-based centers or yards who build taziyas and man the skilled Tassa groups that accompany them. The groups play a set of special rhythms derived from North Indian models that dramatize episodes of the Karbala disaster. Meanwhile, Tassa drumming is heard year-round in Trinidad at various occasions, especially Hindu weddings. Usually a Tassa group is booked for a Friday night party at the groom's house, and then for the wedding day itself on Sunday. The drumming begins when the groom's party, or barat, arrives with its own Tassa band, which joins the band hired by the bride's family. The two engage in a friendly competitive session called a jostle, in which they play special wedding rhythms. Later, the two groups meet for a more cacophonous jostle, in which they play different rhythms at once and try to overpower each other by sheer volume, stamina, and determination. Formal competitions are another part of the Tassa scene. Dozens of groups take part in these for the prize money, the pleasure of playing on stage, and the prestige and subsequent bookings that accrue to winners. In most competitions, like Prem Singh's Junior Tassa Rama, groups are required to play a fixed sequence of rhythms and are judged by standardized criteria. Nevertheless, the judges' decisions invariably provoke some people to hurl accusations of bias, and others to simply shrug their shoulders and smile. Tassa drumming is not a question of free, noisy jamming over a simple beat. Rather, it involves group mastery of a set of composite rhythms called hands, with tight coordination between the ensemble members, who typically play two Tassa kettle drums, a large bass drum, and brass cymbals called jal or jhanj. The lead Tassa, called the cutter, plays flashy foreground parts and guides the group through cadental patterns called tals, which might segue to a different hand or to a faster section called bharti of the same hand. The player of the second Tassa, the fule or fuller, supports the cutter. Most of the hands are adaptations or arrangements of rhythms from other sources. The Kabir Bhajan hand comes from rhythms accompanying devotional songs for the 16th century saint Kabir. The hand called nagara derives from typical rhythms played on the nagara drum. Some hands come from local classical music, an idiosyncratic Trinidadian version of North Indian light classical music. One such hand is tumri. A typical drum suite might last 10 or 20 minutes. Most often, it would start with tikora, with its prominent cutter rolls, and proceed through various tals and different hands. Some of the Tassa rhythms are traditional and may date back to 19th century North Indian practices. But as in India itself, Tassa players like Ryan Ali and his uncle Lenny Kumar are eclectic and value innovation as much as preservation.
Well, I, as a drummer, professional drummer, I get inspiration from like different music, you know, like African type music. I play like Swazi, I play, these are different beats that African drummers play, you know, like Belé, all that kind of stuff. I will learn their beat and mix it with my type music and create Tassa beat with the African style.
A different sort of innovation and a departure from Indian tradition is represented by the presence of a few female players like Donna Ram Sumer of the Evergreen Tassa group. Tassa skills are transmitted in various ways. Some people take lessons from expert drummers like Lenny Kumar, who also enjoys teaching neighborhood kids in his home in South Trinidad. Others learn by informal interaction with older players, and there is no shortage of young virtuosos. In Trinidad today, there are well over 100 groups playing semi-professionally at weddings and other occasions. Tassa and bass drums are locally made by players and artisans who exhibit the same ingenuity as the steel drum makers. The tassas used to be made of clay, but nowadays are made of steel, typically the sawed-off ends of metal canisters. Lenny Kumar, a skilled mechanic as well as a drummer, makes his own tassas. Until the 1990s, Tassa drum heads were made from goat skin, which, though sweet-sounding, needed to be tuned up by heating by fire and also required free-range goats with tough skins. Nowadays, most players use synthetic heads. Goat skin, however, must still be used for the bass drum, whose body is made from a heavy mango wood log. Once that is cut and chiseled out, the goat skin is prepared by scraping the hair off, soaking it, and then fitting it around a bamboo ring. Another ring, called a lock, is then used to secure the skin tightly, as done here by Sunil Mathura, who, like Lenny Kumar, is a craftsman as well as a gifted drummer. The skin is then placed on the drum and holes are driven into its edge. A strong rope, whose end has been stiffened by thread and wax, is then fed through the holes and around the bottom. Slack is taken up and the rope is tightened. Then the excess skin can be cut away. But the head must then dry over a few days and then be loosened and lifted off so that a pancake-shaped mixture called masala can be applied to the inside.
Why don't you put the masala on before you do all this?
Okay. No, it's getting wet. The skin wet, so the masala will hold.
Okay, okay.
Trust me, I've tried it.
The result of so much work is a set of drums that can withstand heavy beating and produce a thunderous sound that provokes some Trinis to cover their ears and others to dance. People concerned about the vitality of Indo-Caribbean culture lament that with every decade, several of the most knowledgeable, talented, and dynamic artists pass away or retire, leaving gaps that can never be replaced. And yet the younger generations have their own dynamism, and in their commitment to be at once Indian and modern, they can be counted on to keep turning to the ancestral Bhojpuri inheritance as a resource, not only for grounding in tradition, but also as a foundation for creative innovation.
शंकर शिव बम बम भोला शंकर शिव बम बम भोला कैलाशपति महाराज Chata